Welcome to the Dad Show podcast. How y'all doing?
Welcome to the Dad Show podcast, a show all about impacting, empowering, inspiring, and uplifting information to become a better dad, husband, man, and mentor. And now your host, Ryan Ladd.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank y'all for coming back to the Dad Show podcast. I got Mr. Scott Sutter. It's spelled Sutter, but it is Mr. Sutter.
Right.
So he's on the podcast today. Him and his wife, I asked that you go and check out their podcast. It's called the Banter and Bliss podcast that him and his wife did. They got some great content on there, social media and through the podcast as well. So I asked that you go check them out. Really, really good stuff for couples, for parents, and just everyday activities and stuff of that nature. So Scott, man, I want to thank you for being on the podcast today, brother.
Yeah, awesome. You bet. I appreciate that introduction as well. We think it's good stuff. You know, we like to share a little bit about the family and specifically our marriage. And the reason we started the podcast is, my wife and I both, we've kind of spent a lot of time, I think, not just like being around great married couples, but also being in homes where the parents stayed together. And one thing that we try to communicate about marriage is it's not easy at all times. It's not trial free. There's no, if you do it right, it won't be hard or anything like that. I think that the designation of marriage is that it's meant to be difficult because it's meant to be a self-sacrifice and it's meant to be a reflection in ways of our relationship with Christ and what he did for us through sacrifice. I think the most successful marriages are the ones that the two spouses are every single day trying to put their spouse ahead of themselves and almost competing for who can do that better and more. And one thing that I like to say about that is that's a competition that everybody wins, right? When both spouses are competing to put the other one ahead of themselves more, everybody's going to win that, including the children, including the kids in the household. So we start the podcast to encourage families, encourage couples, and we kind of doing it on the heels of the idea that we have done a date night every week since we got married. So every single week since we got married, we've gone out on a date and prioritized each other in that way. And even after having children, I mean, my wife was, I think, one day postpartum after our first, and we went on a date together. So we found ways at times during COVID to go on dates at the house once the kids went to sleep, order DoorDash and put a movie on or something along those lines. She decorated our attic one time and we went up there and did a date night in the attic or what have you.
That's so awesome, man. That's so powerful that you continue that connection every week. Like us going through our struggles with my kids' rare disease and their all the stuff that comes along with that, plus work and podcast, just everything. We may find once a month to do a date night to get together if we are able to catch that. So that is so great that you all take that time and make that time and schedule it every week. No matter if it's at home, it's in the attic or, whatever the case may be, man, that's so strong and such good advice that, to do that. And one little point I want to go back to that you mentioned a little bit earlier, it's that competition between the wife and the husband to try and be better or, try to do more. And it's not really a competition, but, along those lines, I say that it should be 100-100 between the two, not 50-50 or not 70-30, but there's going to come those times whenever one of yous are 30 and 170, and you got to be that rock for that person to bring them back up to 100, and
That's right.
And just constantly that battle. But it's a good battle, right? Like just being there for each other, supporting and taking care of, and aside from your marriage and your relationship, like you said, the kids grasping that aspect and holding on to that like my mom and dad don't just kind of not see eye to eye and then they go their separate ways. No, they battled to be stronger together. And the kids learn, like you've got boys and girls, both of them on both sides, and I've got a girl and a boy. Like a dad, it's really tough on that aspect because you have to show your son how to treat a woman and be there for them and be their rock and protect them and love them and be vulnerable at times. But then you've got to show the other side of the daughter that, you know, that's what a man is supposed to treat me like. And so,
Sure.
like, we both got it hard, and man, it sounds like you're doing a great job. So I just want to tell you that, man.
I appreciate that. I always tell people I'm a work in progress, right? we all are. We're all working towards that sanctification.
1% better every day is still a gain, man. It's still
That's right. That's right. And just to kind of, circle back on something that you had mentioned there, which is, so during those times where you kind of lean on your spouse and your spouse is, I believe, a God-given asset, that can hold parts of you up, when you need it. Right. And it's, again, not everybody is at their absolute strongest at all times. And so when you have a marriage built on mutual love and respect, you can lean on your spouse in a very meaningful way during those hard times. And that came for us, and has come for us several different times, but really, really big when my father passed away a couple of years ago, back in 2018. And he got diagnosed in January with a brain tumor and had passed away by July. So it was about a 6-month healthy man, ran every day, ran marathons, didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't, do anything crazy, and got a brain tumor and passed away. And during that time, we had 2 children under the age of 3. And for parents out there who have children that are young, how difficult that is. For parents out there who have, lost loved ones, how difficult that is, right? And so that time was a period that I always reflect back on and think about how special and powerful the love and respect of my wife was to carry me at times through those moments where I felt like I needed to be at the hospital with my mom and my dad and my siblings, to know that she was there to kind of support me and at times fill some of the gaps for my children that, I was just out a lot during that time frame to take care of some other stuff. I mean, Dad was basically in the hospital for 5 straight months, right? More or less, off and on, but spent a lot of time at those hospitals, and she just held down the fort during that time. And I was definitely not at 100%, and she was, she was doing a lot of providing a lot of grace, and also just holding me up in a really meaningful way. And one of the things I just like to, kind of brag on her for, there is literally nobody else in the world that could offer me what my wife can offer me. She knows me better than anybody else knows me. She has more to give me than there's anybody else in the world that could possibly give me. And so I hopefully am going to do my absolute best to praise her as much as I possibly can, every opportunity I get.
And that's so huge to build her up, through everything. I hear, so I'm a firefighter, and, a lot of, unfortunate in the emergency service, a lot of broken marriages and stuff of that nature. So you hear a lot of dogging my wife, like, my wife don't do this, my wife don't do that. And man, like, keep all that at home. Like, keep that, like, you don't go out dogging your wife. Like, you want to continue to be, even though I know it's a special situation with what you went through and how she supported you and was there for you through the whole thing. But man, like, just in general, every day, don't go out dogging your wife. Like, that is your wife. That is your prized possession.
That's right.
You're supposed to love your wife as Christ loved the church.
That's right.
You just don't go out dogging your wife. I understand, like, she may do this and she may do that. That stays at home. That stays with you.
Right.
One question that comes out of what you just described, man, is how strong was that with you, and how much did it mean to you that you knew that you had that support while you were at the hospital, or while you're running errands for your parents, or just your general errands that you had to run? Like, no matter what, you knew that the home front was taken care of, your kids were taken care of, and just that support of your wife. Like, how much did that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, so I talk about, like, I'm I talk about my dad a lot in the context of like, people go through grief, they lose loved ones. And it's never really been like a sense of like painful tears for me. Like if I cry, it's mostly, for fond reasons. But whenever I think about my wife and what she did for me during that time, the reason it moves me to tears is because that is something that, it's so hard to find. It's so hard to find somebody who is going to allow you in some of the times where you have to be strong for a lot of other people, for you to come back and still be vulnerable with them. So personally, it meant a lot to me because she was kind of the only person I had the luxury of being vulnerable for. So I've got 2 biological sisters, 2 adopted sisters, and then a brother. And I just had to be strong and a mom, right? And I had to be as strong as I could for a lot of them during that time. But grief for me, grief lasted about 2.5 years, and the only person that I really ever felt like I was able to be vulnerable with, besides in prayer, was my wife, and her, I guess, grace and willingness to allow me to do that. There's almost no words to describe what it meant to me and what it continues to mean to me, and how that experience of losing my father, and kind of, again, when you become a parent, you're thrust into maturity in a very quick way. When you go through things like losing a loved one, you're also thrust into maturity. And you and I spoke about this ahead of time, but when you go through some of the things that you guys have gone through, you're thrust into maturity, right? And these deeper and deeper ways. And so over the last couple of years since he has passed away, I've actually progressed and I think grown in my professional life in a really substantial way, to the point where I'm in a position now that I didn't think I'd be in by the time I was 33. And I have to give her 100% of the credit, her and God, all the credit for that, because during that time frame where so many people lose a loved one and their lives either come to a halt or they fall apart or whatever you want to call it, God blessed me with a tremendous amount of joy and gratefulness for my dad, and he blessed me with a wife that just never wavered in her faithfulness to me and her patience with me and her grace to me. And so I know I'm going on and on about this, but
no, it's worth going on and on for, man. I mean, she was so strong and supportive of you, and that means, like you said, no matter in your job or you're running a 5K or anything, like this, the support, not even just from a wife, but even from a husband's standpoint, the support of a spouse, knowing they're going to have your back 100% no matter what, is so strong, man. It makes you, you could be at like 65, 70% going into whatever you're going to do. But whenever you feel that support of your spouse 100%, like you jump more.
That's right.
And you may get up to your 90 to 100% going into it. And you're going to do a lot better because it's just so, it's like when somebody's praying for you, you know what I mean? Like there's people on the street that pass you and you're like, man, I'm praying for you. And they may or may not. But when you know somebody is praying for you and you feel that power in the prayer, like how much more momentum it gives you, that's the same way with your support of your spouse. Like it just makes you almost have supernatural power with whatever you're doing. And man, that's so strong, really, really. So we went on and on about your wife, and and I'm very grateful. But man, I want to. Sounds like your dad had a lot of influence on your life growing up, and so if you don't care, kind of let's talk a little bit about him. Like what influence he had growing up. Was you brought up in this situation? Let's just hear about your dad, man. I'm really excited about this.
Perfect. So I've got enough content on my dad to, I think, write a whole novel. So I'll do my best to pause, intentionally, so that we can dialogue about it. But my dad was about 6'4". He was incredibly handsome, in my opinion, as his son, and one of the most, I think, like gentle, mild-tempered people that most people who met him would agree, like in kind of the upper echelon in terms of like gentleness, patience, and humility. He got saved when he was about 26 years old and raised 4 children who all love the Lord and are walking with the Lord. And then my mom and him adopted another young girl before he passed, and then my mom has since adopted another girl. So he was about 62 years old when he.
That's special,
ahead,
man.
sorry.
That's special. I'm sorry. I can't just let that little
Yeah, sure.
tidbit pass, like that she's raised well together with your father, and they adopted while he was alive, and then even after his passing that she adopted another. Man, that's wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. And we always say that Dad, he just like had these crazy friends that it's like, how in the world did you become friends with that person? Well, I met him during a inner city mission trip and we just stayed in touch, and now they come to the house and hang out with us once a month. It was just like, it's like the kind of, he's like, we always said he loved the unlovable, right? He always loved the unlovable, which is what Jesus did. So again, like just another amazing testimonial, element, but that kind of manifested itself in the form of adoption, as he was kind of late in his life. They started fostering and then eventually adopted, the older of my 2 adopted sisters, and then they fostered my younger adopted sister. And then when he got sick, she moved into a different home for a time being. And then after he passed away, she came back, and then Mom eventually adopted her. But yeah, just, because I've seen it firsthand, I can kind of understand and appreciate a little bit more than probably the average person does that hasn't seen it firsthand. But like, adoption is not for the faint of heart. It is just a very, you have to have a massive heart to adopt and to go through kind of that entire pursuit. And then at the end of the day, your reward is to raise a child, right? And that's, speaking from a parent's perspective, raising a child is not an easy thing to do. And if you add the element of it not being your biological child, you are making an active decision to love this human being that you have no kind of like birthright over, right? And so it's a very difficult thing. And again, like just tremendous people adopt, like just uniquely gifted, loving people go through that whole process. And so I can't say enough wonderful things about that, exactly about that element, right? Like, and I'm happy to dwell on that a little bit more, but that was just kind of, again, it knowing him as long as I did, it didn't surprise me at all that he had a heart for it, because, his spirit and his perspective of his own faith was he never lost sight of the fact that he did not deserve the love of Jesus. And when you live your entire life as a Christian knowing that I don't deserve the love of Jesus, it creates such a pure faith and such a powerful faith that is just like nothing short of moving and inspiring. And he said, and I've quoted this 8 million times, so anybody that's watching this probably knows what I'm about to say, but if you've heard me say it before, but when he first got diagnosed, I remember, and this is a man that I watched, I would come home at 3 a.m. from being out with friends, and he'd be on his knees in prayer, and it was just, I watched my entire life be so faithful. And then he said this when he got diagnosed. He said, I was roadkill on the side of the road, and Jesus came and scraped me up and put me at his table. And I remember being like, man, what a perspective to have after being saved for 30 years, 40 years, to have the perspective, this point of the children you've raised and the mission work you've done in the ministry that you've served in, to still feel that way about the love of Jesus. I mean, it just was so moving, like so powerful. And he carried a lot of that through his whole sickness, but growing up, he was such a goofy guy too. Like, he was just like he kind of did this attentional aloof thing where he would like pretend he didn't understand what you were saying. So then he would like requote some version of what he heard you say. And so he was always just such a goofball growing up. And we did this thing when he passed away, actually, that we started an email account for everybody that knew my dad, that was basically like Jim Sutter stories at gmail.com. And they all would email their stories in about him. which was pretty cool. Oh, it was phenomenal. And so we had all these hilarious stories pouring in about our dad, but you know, so many people knew that side of him, but the side that they didn't know was when I was going through middle school, and I talked about this in his eulogy, which is online somewhere, but when I was going through middle school, I struggled with a lot of anxiety and you know, depression's probably too strong of a word, but just kind of like hopelessness. And when you're 12, you know, Jesus sacrificing himself on the cross oftentimes doesn't carry the weight that it does when you reach the age of accountability and fully understand it. But what happened when I went through all that time through all that you know, like anxiety and fear, was that my dad was always right there. He would stay up late with me and talk. He would read scripture to me. He would pick me up from school and take me out to get ice cream and just talk, right? And not always about like, how do you feel? But just like, he was just there. And so again, the thing that always, like, as an adult reflecting back on these moments, especially when he did pass away, the reflection that I had was just like, what a great image of God the Father. Dad didn't solve the problems that I faced. Like, I didn't feel instantly like all my fears and anxieties were just gone, but when I needed to turn to someone, he was always there. And as an adult reflecting back, what a wonderful, you know, so many people, well, I've heard this said before, when they have a bad relationship with their own father and they hear the words God the Father, they say, well, my dad did this, my dad did that. And I'm spoiled because my dad did a great job of showing me what the love of God the Father could manifest itself as. And he was a sinful, flawed human, but he was just such a steady, faithful character in my life as a father that is what I'm trying to live up to with my kids, right? And the example that he set was one of sacrificing material and earthly things to pursue his wife and his children and his God, you know, God and Jesus Christ. And what a noble thing to be remembered by. What a wonderful, wonderful way for your children to remember you, right? And cancer and death and all those things, you know, I always say, like, cancer does more than just kill you. It humiliates you. Like, I've seen multiple people that I love die of cancer, and including my best friend when I was 26 years old. He was 26 and he died of cancer. And it just is, and he was actually your cousin, but we were, like, you know, so close. And I watched it do the same thing to him that it did to my dad. I mean, it just kind of wears you down and turns you into a shell. And, you know, the humiliation that you face when you go through that. I mean, it was a long 6 months and it was a painful 6 months. But the way that I remember my dad is jogging up and down the street that we grew up on called Nature Run, sitting down, you know, after jumping in the pool after a run, sitting down to have dinner and just goofing it up, you know, and then being so steady throughout the course of my life in the areas that I really needed it. So I could go on for another, you know, 30 minutes about my dad, but he is my hero and the person that I aspire to be.
He sounds like it, man. He sounds like, I don't know if you've ever been through Tony Evans' Bible study, the Kingdom Man, or that series or not, but whenever you have sat here described him, like, that is exactly what I'm thinking of this whole time. Like, pure grace, pure patience, pure love, and was just, no matter what, he had his hands out ready to help anybody and show you the love of Jesus. And man, thank you for sharing that, because that's really awesome, man. And one of the things that I get out of that is continuing to help people no matter what state they're in, like, you know, whether they're poor or rich or whatever, just have those hands of giving because of how much fulfillment of Jesus he had in him to show that and bring that out and try to give that to other people and lead them to build God's kingdom. Like, that's really powerful, man. That's really powerful.
Yeah. And I always think back to, again, like, he got a business degree from Purdue, had a pretty promising potential career ahead of him. And, you know, God didn't see fit necessarily to turn him into this a super wealthy entrepreneur. We weren't a super wealthy family growing up. But the things that God blessed him with are the things that I think most people would trade wealth for.
That's what I was about to say. He was wealthy. He was very, very wealthy. Maybe not in a monetary standpoint, which is what people consider being wealthy. But from his standpoint, he was the richest man in the world. He had a beautiful family, was continuing to give, had God's strength and God's love inside of him, and was continuing to give that out. And that's wealthy to me, man. Like,
That's right.
You know what I mean? That's really, really powerful.
He loved this song called "The Measure of a Man," and I'm trying to remember who sings it. But if you like Google search "The Measure of a Man" song or whatever, lyrics maybe, you'll be able to find it. And I just remember, like, my dad, similar to how I am, like he got choked up all the time. You know what I mean? Like he was always crying at movies and crying at songs and stuff. And I'm probably a little bit more like my temperament's a little bit more like my mom is, but I cry at stuff like my dad used to cry at stuff. And in that song used to always kind of bring the tears out of him, but it was such a good reflection of like who he was and the things that really were important to him. And basically the message of the song is the measure of a man. Only God knows the measure of a man. Like we try to measure men by achievements that mankind understands, but it's only God who's able to see the heart and able to measure a man by, the scales that truly matter.
I sensed a lot in that whenever you were talking to relate back to my question, but I'm curious, what is one thing that you take away from your dad that you see yourself applying to your family today? Like I'm sure there's a ton, but what's one of the main things that you put into place with your family?
I love that question. I would say the number one thing that I try to implement that I learned from my dad is apologizing. And the power of an apology, I think a lot of people look at an apology in 2025 as either not worth accepting or being empty. I don't have to accept your apology. I don't have to forgive you. I don't have to. You're right. You don't. Also, somebody might look at an apology and be like, well, I need more than just an apology. I need, fill in the blank. And in some contexts, it's probably true. But to see my father humble himself at times where he was maybe 2% wrong and I was 98% wrong, especially as a boneheaded child or teenager, like the sweet irony of being a man is when you're, 18 years old, you've got it all figured out. And by the time you reach the age of 30, you realize you have none of it figured out. Right. So to know in retrospect that those times where we clashed and I thought I had it all figured out, that I was just so wrong, but him still pursuing me and apologizing to me. And he, I don't know if I ever actually heard him say these words, but I say these words to my kids all the time. Because like I mentioned, like my temperament is not quite as like calm spirited as my dad's was. So I say these words to my kids all the time. I say, Dad needs Jesus just like you need Jesus. Dad needs Jesus too. Right. And it's because I mess up 100 times a day and I want my children to hear me apologize to them when I do mess up.
And be vulnerable and show them that you're willing to admit it. Yeah.
Especially now that they're old enough to pick up on it, right? My older 3 are 9, 7, and 5. And so they recognize at times where it's like, well, you got upset with me, but I didn't even do anything wrong. Like that wasn't fair that you got upset with me for that. Right. And so there are times where obviously I make the wrong sort of judgment call on what happened. And I got to go back to them and I got to apologize. And I got to say, you know what, guys, I'm really sorry. Dad messed this one up and Dad needs Jesus too. And I think, this is obviously a hypothesis because my kids are still relatively young, but I think the recognition that I can't do 100% of the things with 100% accuracy and perfection in the communication of that to them hey, I don't get it right all the time. My hope is that that gives them the ability to reflect on moments of their childhood where they felt misguided or where they felt like, everybody has things from their past, from their childhood that they're like, man, mom and dad screwed that up. I wish they wouldn't have done this or, whatever. Like, when I grow up, I'm never doing it that way. So my hope is that having the ability to be aware of that now and to communicate to them now, I don't get it right 100% of the time. And I'm going to come to you and I'm going to humbly ask for an apology, humbly ask for forgiveness in those moments. My hope is that that helps them as they get older, show grace to me and some of the decision making that their mom and I made when they were young. And that's probably the biggest thing that I try to, I again, like, from a personality perspective, my dad and I, pretty different personalities, right? But that doesn't mean that I didn't look up to him, that I didn't love him, that I'm not so appreciative of everything that he did, and that I don't want to do that in my family for my family. But we were just different. We're geared differently. Like he would pass the opportunity to sit at the table with the president of the United States, and I would jump at that opportunity. You know what I mean? Like we're just different. So I know that I can't always do exactly what my dad did when it comes to parenting. But the biggest thing that I think I take away from how he influenced me growing up is that he was very apologetic at times, to a fault. And if I can be that apologetic to my children and not give them this notion that I have it all figured out and that my way is the law and that, yada, yada, yada. But if I communicate to them, hey, dad makes mistakes and dad needs Jesus, as they grow up, they're not going to run away from Jesus. They're going to embrace Jesus and recognize that it's because of his love that we're able to do anything good in our lives. So that would be, that's why I love that question, because it gives me an opportunity, I think, to kind of brag on my dad, but also to brag on, on my God a little bit. He's the perfect father. I'm not.
Well, that, it teaches your kids and anybody listening, like, you don't have to be perfect to talk to Jesus. You don't have to be perfect to go, and you don't even have to go to church, to find Jesus. Like, you can find Jesus anywhere and you can worship him and, pray to him no matter if you're at church or not. But it shows that you don't have to be perfect. Like, he takes the broken and makes them whole. Like,
That's right.
And that's exactly what you're teaching your children by saying, look, I'm broken. I messed up. I screwed up. I admit it. One, you're taking responsibility for it, but number two, you're showing them that I'm not perfect, but Jesus is, and we can look up to him and ask for his forgiveness, just like I'm asking for your forgiveness. And you're teaching them so many things there. I can't even think of the word I'm looking for, but you're teaching a lot there. And one thing I remembered you talking about your dad, and it's a good segue to where my next question is you said he was there. He was supportive. Like, he wasn't trying to fix the problem. He wasn't trying to, manipulate you or not manipulate you, but like lead you in a certain direction. He was
Right.
just there. And so one of the biggest things that comes out of that I try to do with my kids is put my phone away, put the electronics away, like just be there with them. If they want to play a puzzle for 15 minutes, like, their attention span is going to change in 15 minutes and they're going to want to do something else. But that time that you're just there, even if you're not working the puzzle, even if you're not playing the princess, whatever the case may be, just your presence of being with them is so huge. So segueing into the next question is, you've got a podcast, you've got your job that is, that through every day is going on. You're at home with them. You also mentioned that, you teach some youth at the church, and I'd like to hear just a little bit about that as well. But right now the question is, how do you juggle, all that, but be present for your kids? And, let's not forget, you're in a marriage, so you have to be present with your wife. So, just a quick synopsis of how you juggle all that time and try to be as present as you possibly can.
Yeah. I love that question too. So, one thing that we do that I think is really, really cool, and we didn't even talk about this, so this is kind of neat, but each one of our kids, on the day of the month they were born, we take them on a one-on-one. So this month, all of our children are born between the 2nd and the 15th of the month that they were born in. So on the 2nd, I take my 2-year-old. On the odd months, I take him, and on the even months, my wife takes him. So on the 2nd, we take our 2-year-old. On the 8th, we take our 7-year-old. On the 12th, we take our 5-year-old. On the 15th, we take our 9-year-old, and then obviously as our new baby grows, on the 11th, we'll take him out. So we try to take like a specific individual date is what we call it, a date night with each one of our kids every single month. Right now, it varies between me and my wife because we can't both go. But so that's one thing that we do is we try to take them out and do something special and unique with them. Now, God love my wife, she's her kind of idea of that is let's go to a park and let's run around and let's get some fresh air. My idea of that usually is like, let's go to a movie, let's go buy something, let's get, so they get kind of a good taste one way or the other of kind of what those date nights could potentially look like. But on those those kind of trips out or whatever, it's like a no phone, no, technology sort of thing. We kind of go and try to be very intentional with conversation, try to be very intentional just with that time. And again, like for parents out there of little kids, that to your point exactly, the attention span is very short. It's usually on to the next thing. Sometimes it is like, hey, can we go get ice cream? And here in Cincinnati, there's a ice cream place called Grater's. I don't know if you're familiar.
Love Grater's. Salted caramel chocolate chip is my jam.
Dude, they have I believe they have, I might be wrong, but they have like a coffee, almost like they call them chillers, I think, but it's like a coffee there. They mix in the salted caramel, chunk or whatever with the coffee. It's unbelievable.
Oh, man.
This is a little shout out, little, promo for Graders, but
exactly.
But so there's a Graders here in Cincinnati that has like a big indoor play place. And so one night I took my Zion as my 5-year-old, but we went over and played at the indoor playground for about 2 hours or so and had ice cream and stuff like that. So we take him out on that individual date. The other thing that I like to do is they're kind of old enough now to tag along on a lot of the out of the house sort of things that we do. And so because they are homeschooled, there's not tons of outside of the house activities going on besides maybe like church or maybe some family birthday parties or whatever.
Yeah.
So I always try to kind of get them out. And we lived in an area of town until about 6 months ago that was very like racially diverse. And I didn't grow up in an area that was very racially diverse. And to have, I think, that level of kind of like racial inclusivity and diversity was also just very healthy for them. So I was like, well, you guys come with me. Like, we're going to go to the hardware store. We're going to go to the grocery store. We're going to go somewhere. Like, just come with me, right? Yeah. Come and experience that stuff with me. And my dad used to joke, he used to be like, nobody ever wants to go with me anywhere. And it's kind of interesting because now every time I go out of the house, pretty much my kids want to go with me.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a little bit of that public school element that maybe was like, we just got back from school. We don't want to go back out. We want to veg or whatever. So that's one thing also that I try to do is I try to take them with me as much as I can to the things that I'm going to go do. And as the boys get a little bit older, or even as my daughters get a little bit older, if they want to go to the gym or if they want to go, I work out about 4 times a week. So if they want to go with me up to the gym or if they want to go play basketball somewhere, go to the park, go to a sports gauge, stuff like that. My hope is that we go out and do some of those activities together. In the home, my wife does a lot on social media. I do a decent amount with social media and with digital marketing for a living. And so one of the things that we are kind of working on is we don't do much like just like public TV. Now, we did watch a lot of football this year. I watched a lot of the NFL this year. So it's kind of funny. Like my son makes a lot of comments about these like scary movie commercials that'll pop up. And he'll be like, I don't want to see Smile 2, Dad. It looks too scary. I'm like, buddy, I don't want to see too either. But so we're trying to do a little bit more to kind of claw that sort of thing back, right? But they are constantly doing puzzles, constantly playing games, constantly making up their own things. In fact, we didn't talk about this either, but they made this book, and I know there are some people that might find this a little edgy, but they wrote a children's book called Farty the Fart. And so I posted about it on Instagram.
I hadn't seen that. I'll have to check that out.
The reel has like 1.2 million views. It's gone crazy. People are commenting like, we need this published and we want to buy this book when it's out and all kinds of different stuff. So
wow.
we're trying to encourage that level of kind of creativity and kind of just, like non-digital media type of stuff. So my wife is constantly taking them to the library to get books out of the library, to do more reading and to do more, things along those lines. Now there is the occasional, we catch them looking over our shoulder while we're on our phone too much, and we try to be self-aware of stuff like that. But, by and large, we try to focus as much as we can on the homeschooling side of things, creating their own world, creating their own stories, puzzles and games and stuff along those lines. And they're kind of reaching that point now where they're a little bit maybe able to engage in games like Clue and games that are a little bit more, like a little bit more involved, right? Yeah. So you kind of dive into a little bit more, hang on to that attention span for a little bit longer. But I know I've been going on for about 10 minutes now, but that's kind of what we try to do to try to pull things back from the digital media and focus on like, how do we stay in the present with them, doing games and activities and spending that one-on-one time with them. So those are some of the things that we do.
That's huge. That's so two things. Brandon Janis, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago, he's got a small publishing company, or he's got a publishing company for small people, or not small people, but it takes a lot for for these big publishing companies to pull your book out. So I need to hook you all up together.
Please do, because I'm not kidding you. I filed the trademark and everything. Like I'm dead serious. Like this is kismet, because honestly, like I was looking up how to self-publish, and I'm not kidding you when I say hundreds of people have said, if you publish this, we'll buy copies. So
yeah, I need to hook you all up together. And the second thing is, you talk about pulling away from the digital world. Like one thing that we instill in our family is when we sit down for dinner, no phones, like not at all. We want to talk as a family. That's our family time. I'm gonna have to pull that of what you do with your kids every month, of vice versa with surely we can fit that in, man. That's a great idea. But Brandon Janis, who I just mentioned about, had the publishing company. He also said that, and this was huge. I never thought about this. Like, I tell my kids, no, you're not getting on the iPad. You're not getting on the TV. You're not getting on this device. But that also means me. I don't need to be on mine either. Like, if I'm going to tell you not to be, then all they're going to do is, well, you told me not, but you're sitting there on yours. So how's that make them feel? So that's really huge that you all disconnect. You try to bring the writing aspect and using your imagination and, all those different variables into play. So that's great, man. That's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, one thing I remember when, so my brother he's about 3 years older than me, and his oldest is about 6 years younger than my oldest. Or maybe even more than that. She might only be about 2, but they just had their second. So he's older than me, but his oldest is way younger than my oldest. So I had kids way before he did. And one thing, he would come, and he lives in England, so he would come to visit, and we would have these conversations before he had children. But one thing that I remember kind of like picking up on was, there are times where I find myself being very irritable with my children. And I realize it's because they want my attention, but I'm staring at my phone. And it was kind of one of those like earth-shattering moments where I'm like, this is like offensive in 2 different ways. I'm like ignoring them and getting frustrated with them, and I got my face in my phone. And it was one of those, again, whole, like shattered glass, in the brain sort of moments. And I just realized, like, man, my attention, first of all, is always under attack from the devil, right? He I think C.S. Lewis wrote this, but it's like, the devil's not trying to get you to sin. He's really just trying to get you distracted, right? So sin is a product of that, right? But keeping distracting you from focusing on Christ and from seeing God and then moving towards God. It doesn't always have to be this big climactic sin or this big catastrophic, thing that you've done. Sometimes it's just the white noise that keeps you distracted and keeps your eyes off of him, right? Peter fell into
little bits and pieces to try and just, those little bits and pieces. It's not going to be this big black object with red horns it's coming at you. No, it's going to be this little small little picture here, this small little video here, and then eventually you're like, oh, it's okay, you accept it. Like you said, he's the ultimate deceiver.
That's right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No, you're good. You're good. I just was basically saying, like, when I had that moment, that kind of epiphany that, like, and this was years ago, but you have that epiphany of, like, the reason I'm irritable right now is because I'm trying to do this thing over here on my phone and they're trying to get my attention. And as their father and as the one that wants to build a long lasting relationship with them, like, you just have to make this, and it feels sacrificial, but you have to say, you know what, you guys are just so much more important than vegging, than being entertained by my cell phone right now. And so, yeah, having that intentional time, putting that phone away, putting that iPad away, putting the computer away at the end of the day, and really kind of leaning in and focusing on the family is just so crucial.
Well, and a big battle with, and I'm sure you all battle this too, like a lot of the time on my phone, I'm not doing it for entertainment. I'm not doing it because I want to talk to somebody. I'm doing it because I'm working on a podcast. I'm working for our nonprofit organization. It's that battle, man. You're doing it because you want to build this up to make wealth come in, make money come in for them.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you're taking time away from what matters, for this, thinking that it's the better for them. But really, it's that constant battle of how much of this do I do for them, and then how much do I do for actually paying attention for them. You're taking away from the whole goal of everything, and so that's a big battle. And one of the things I try to do, like if I'm on my phone or I'm on the computer, and one of my kids walk up, I don't, continue looking at my phone and talk to them. I try to take the phone away and pull my face towards them so that they know that they have my full attention, that, and that's hard sometimes. Sometimes you have to write a text message. Sometimes you have to answer the phone. Sometimes you have to write an email, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you can just say, hey, look, give me 30 seconds and I'll give you my full attention, or let me finish this in 5 seconds. I'll get, give them a time limit. Don't just say, give me a few minutes and I'll be done. Like, give them a time frame, because they're going to come in a few minutes, be like, hey, it's been a few minutes. Like, where are you at? Why are you not paying attention to me? And then that comes that whole struggle in the mind. Oh, my daddy wants to pay more attention to his phone than he does me, and I don't matter. And then, then the devil's in their head. And like you said, it's just small little things. And then all of a sudden it's something big, something huge. And, that's really big. I feel like the phone is the devil, or a computer is the devil, but it's also a blessing. You know what I mean? Like, and you just have to figure out where that fine line is and just don't cross it.
Well, and one of the things, as I've taught the college age class at the church, one of the things that we've talked about is how God gives mankind these gifts, and mankind finds a way to pervert them and take them to the extreme, right? And how quickly and easily something can be taken out of context and perverted. And obviously sexuality is a huge piece of that, but something as simple as the internet, which connected everybody all over the world, very quickly mankind found a way to use that for destruction, right?
Exactly.
And to bring in mankind as a channel of evil and wickedness and the devil, but found a way to take something that united everybody all over the world and turn it into something that corrupted the hearts of so many people and distracted so many people. And social media in general, like, there's so little light and hope on social media that, like, something like your podcast is so encouraging to see, like, how can I tap into this river, this stream, this ocean, if you will, of just distraction and try to bring people to the foot of the cross. There's a lot of pastors and a lot of Christian churches and a lot of Christian podcasts and a lot of things out there that are doing that. And I think it is a mission field. And so I think it's awesome, some of the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That means a lot. So I know we got just a couple more minutes. Real quickly, I'd like for you to hit on your college course that you got going on. And then there's one more question I want to ask you after that. So let's hear about that college course real quick.
Yeah. So we teach the college age kids at our church, and we've gone through most of the New Testament epistles and are now working through the book of Joshua. And one of the things I think about, I know it because I lived it. Like, when I got out of high school and was no longer living in my parents' home, it was kind of like, let me try and do this on my own. You know what? I've done the church thing. I've been there, every Sunday more or less. I've had to get picked up early after sleepovers with my friends and, had to miss sporting events so that I could go to church. You know what? I'm going to try it on my own for a little while. And, we talked, I think, a little bit about this either at the beginning of the podcast or before the podcast, but it's amazing how quickly I found myself in a position of unhappiness and lacked fulfillment. So when we were asked to teach that class, I was so excited, and my wife and I both kind of jumped at the opportunity, because when I got out of school, and this is kind of a cool little testimony, but when I got out of college, I had gotten right with the Lord and decided that I wanted to go into full-time ministry. And when I got out of college, I actually searched for opportunities to teach a college-age class for about 2 years, roughly. Kind of applied to some different stuff and was hoping that the Lord would open up that door of opportunity. And eventually, He kind of moved me into this position of, kind of like a business person and a salesperson, and kind of desiring growth in business and to build something special there. And then, you kind of fast forward 10 years, and all of a sudden we have an opportunity now to lead this college ministry at our church, which is exactly what I wanted when I first got out of school, right?
Wow, that's awesome.
And it's the ministry that, like, in my head was what gave me the desire to do that.
Yeah.
It's the ministry that helped me get right with the Lord, that really pursued me when I was kind of going through, some of those darker times. So it just was cool how that took about 10 years to kind of come back to me, but it's just really fun.
On your time, it was on God's time, right?
That's right. God's timeline. That's right. So anyways, there's no, we use a curriculum that the church kind of passes on to us, but it's cool to be able to dig into the scripture and then to kind of cover some of those things. But reading the first chapter of Joshua the last 2 weeks, we've kind of been able to look at, the book of Joshua is all about the people and the promise and the land, right? And, they enter the promised land, they conquer the promised land, then they divide the promised land. And there's a lot of visual, the imagery of salvation, being pulled out of slavery, going through a period of time of kind of growth and uncertainty, and at times questioning God's will and God's position and guidance, and then ultimately crossing into the promised land, potentially looking at it from a certain context of salvation.
Yeah.
And experiencing Christian life. We're not always promised not to go through hardship in Christian life.
Is that the truth? Yes.
Almost promised the opposite, right? Christian life is promised to be difficult. And so it's been interesting, the first chapter, and we'll kind of go further into the book of Joshua. But that's kind of what we're doing with the college age kids.
That's awesome, man. That's great. All right, so my last question: you take your car in for maintenance, right? You go get your oil checked, you get the tires rotated, something's going on. You may even hear some kind of ticking noise, whatever. Let's put that in an aspect of your marriage. How do you take your marriage into maintenance and make sure that everything is running smooth, the oil's changed, tires are perfectly inflated? What's one of those things that you kind of do a monthly maintenance check on your marriage to make sure that it's flowing smoothly?
Yeah. This is a phenomenal question. And I think it's a great question, to your point, exactly, because not everybody's going to answer that question the same way. My wife and I, we are very clear verbal communicators with one another. When we are not aligned, if you think about tire alignment, right? When we're not aligned, we have a rocking chair in our room. And when I sit down in that rocking chair and she sits on the bed and we're talking to each other, that is when we do the most heavyweight boxing with each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, like, the purpose of your spouse is not always to have the kid gloves on. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. And we tell each other all the time, like, there are two big things that we say in our marriage. And the first one is, like, God has blessed me with you to help you grow and to help me grow. And you don't grow without pain. You don't grow without discomfort. And everybody, no matter what the circumstances, is going to face pain and discomfort in marriage, because, again, it's all about how can I sacrifice and give more of myself to my spouse than to myself, right? That's the idea of marriage. I need to be attached to this person and willing to die for this person and give up my comfort for this person's comfort. And when both people do that, something special happens. So that's one thing that we say is, we're here to help each other grow. And at times that means make each other uncomfortable. The second thing is we don't avoid hard things just because they're hard. That is one of the most important things that we talk about in our marriage all the time, is to not do something because it's hard is almost the worst reason not to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It drives me up a wall sometimes where it's like, well, we can't do that. That would be impossible. It's like, do you understand what the word impossible means? Impossible is not a synonym of the word hard. Okay. Like
Exactly.
impossible means there's no possible way.
Yeah.
For me to birth a child is impossible. I cannot do it.
Yes, exactly.
For us to fly to England to see my brother, not impossible.
Exactly.
Hard? Yes. Not impossible. You know what I mean? So we have that conversation a lot too, where it's, something being hard oftentimes makes it that much more worth pursuing, and it makes the achievement meaningful. If things are easy, the achievement doesn't mean anything.
And to me, makes you stronger once you're on the other side of it.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
And the word impossible is I'm possible.
There you go. There you go. I've never heard that before, but that's right. That's right. So I would say that the way that we do our kind of like maintenance is through verbal communication. Now we do a date night every Tuesday, so we have an opportunity to talk then. We do a date night. We do like our kids go to bed, between 8 and 9 most nights, and so we have an opportunity to talk after that. And then we also do an annual anniversary trip. And so we always go on an anniversary trip for typically a couple of nights. Now this year, because we just had a baby, he'll go with us. But we'll still go and spend a few nights out. And on those trips, we typically like to kind of like reset and have some conversations about what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Things along those lines. But it's never from the context of, like, is there a safety release button on our marriage? Do we have the concept that like you can bail on a marriage doesn't make it a marriage. That makes it not a marriage, right? In my opinion. And I, we talk about this on our podcast a decent amount, but marriage is not about being sexually, physically, emotionally attracted to the person you're married to at all times. That's not what marriage is. If you get to the point where you're like, I just don't feel that way about you anymore, then you had a false sense of what marriage was, because marriage is a commitment and it's a promise. Yeah. It is not a promise to be attracted. It's a promise to be faithful and to be with that person and to grow with that person and to build something with that person. And as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, there is nothing that anybody else can offer me that is better and superior to what my wife can offer me. And does that mean that marriage is easy for us? No, it's not easy for us. We got 5 kids, right? Like marriage is tough. Yeah. And every single day, there are 100 times a day where you want to say like, do we even really understand each other? But I think one of the exciting things about marriage is when you do dedicate yourself to each other, you kind of grow together in a very organic way. And, there's nobody else that I'd rather be tackling this with than my wife. And so it's important to communicate directly to each other at times. How do we get through some of this stuff that we're working on?
Clear, concise communication. I say triple C to my wife all the time, man.
That's right.
All the time.
Love it.
I know you got to jump on another meeting. Real quick, if people want to dive down deeper with you and your wife and hear some more of your podcast, like where can they go to find that at?
So we are on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Banter and Bliss Pod, I believe, is our TikTok and Instagram. It might just be Banter and Bliss on Instagram, and then our YouTube channel, I believe, also is Banter and Bliss Pod. But it's an ampersand, not the word and. So I every once in a while I'll try to like search for our account and I can't find it, and I'm like, what in the world? And I realize it's because we're not popular enough yet for Google or for YouTube to be able to, point people directly to us, but you can find us on all those different channels.
Awesome. I'll have links in the show notes and in the comments as well to their podcast and their social media. But Scott, I can't thank you enough for coming on today, being vulnerable, man, and just putting yourself out there, and man, I can't thank you enough, brother.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, same to you. I appreciate the invitation, and it's absolutely been my pleasure. Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll continue to stay in touch and follow up with what with your story and what you got you're going through.
I appreciate that, man. Everybody go follow Scott and his wife Sarah and their family at the Banter and Bliss podcast on most social media outlets. As always, we love you, we're proud of you, and we care about you. Have a blessed day. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Dad Show podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Dad Show podcast. Please like, review, and subscribe.